hope that those who are listening or are following our teachings will read, such as Book 2 of the Church Committee Reports, Book 2, Intelligence Activities and the Rights of Americans, because you will find out that Dr. King was a target of the FBI. Dr. King was harassed and intimidated, harangued and followed, and they attempted so hard to vilify him, and he stood up outside of all of that. Everybody has heard the media's representation of the whole civil rights movement, and it was a presentation of the attorneys. It was the lawmakers, the United States Incorporated Congress, that keeps human beings in a form of perpetual slavery by pitting them against each other, teaching them concepts such as religious indoctrination and culture indoctrination and language indoctrination and patriotism, to so many things as a means of polarizing human beings. Now, when the FBI could not vilify Dr. King, when the FBI could not facilitate the political death of Dr. King, they went ahead and prompted his assassination. And you can read these things in the Church Committee Reports, Book 2, Intelligence Activities and the Rights of Americans. And everybody's concerned with the NSA now and all of these other things, but they really should be concerned with the action of consent. Every time you consent, you're entering into contract as a citizen or as an American or as an individual. These concepts allow them the right to do these things, because you are then a product of the United States Incorporated. And as a product, they will be taking care of you just the way that you are seeing. Cops shooting people in theaters. Manchurian candidates shooting kids at school. These things are promoted and perpetrated by FBI, by federal hands, and children exposed to the psychiatric industry. These children and adults that are children are usually in therapy. They're usually in counseling. They have a psychiatrist as a handler, promoting sadness and depression and then medicating these things. And these medications, I know they prescribed Rohypnol for anxiety. Now everybody knows that Rohypnol is the date rape drug. Children, when they're put on Rohypnol, they have fugue states, dissociative states. They can't remember, and they state this, in interviews. And one of the most profound was Jeffrey Dahmer. They had been interviewing Jeffrey Dahmer, and then all of a sudden, he's killed. Okay, in those interviews, they found out a lot of things that he knew. A lot of things that he knew about psychiatrists and handlers. And of course, they knew his background. He was raised by matriarchal females, and he was acting out. He felt abandoned. And cannibalism is a sign of abandonment, extreme levels of abandonment as a child. He was attempting to keep his victims with him forever. And in his mind, he did not view them as victims. And these are through the actions of psychiatry. Now, today on CNN, they had a story about feeling safe living in these times or living in America. And, everybody needs to realize what you're fearing, what you're feeling. Now, today on the NewYorkDailyNews.com, school safety agent arrested for pulling a knife. Rita Rodriguez threatened her boyfriend's mother with the blade during an argument, says cops. A school safety agent was arrested for pulling a knife in an argument with her boyfriend's mother. School safety agent was busted after brandishing a knife at her boyfriend's mother's Wednesday night, authorities said. Rita Rodriguez, 32, pulled the blade during a heated argument in her Bronx home. Police said she was arrested shortly before 9 p.m. and charged with menacing, reckless endangerment, and criminal possession of a weapon. Cops said no one was hurt in the scuffle. This is a school safety officer. And to get her way, she pulled a knife on an elderly individual. These are the people that are at your children's schools, that you maintain them in. And you keep them there 9 hours a day, 8 or 9 hours a day, which is more time than they spend with you, the parent, where they're learning to gravitate towards another authority and to rely on these school safety agents that are absolute chaos. These individuals that you put your children with, you allow your children to be protected by the same wolf guarding the hen house. And something's got to change. You've got to wake up and realize who's preying on who and why there is such a need for you to get them out of these schools, out of these Hitler youth camps, away from the uniform and the pledge of allegiance to a flag and worship of a golden calf. In News Channel 4, Oklahoma City, KFOR.com, Oklahoma insurance agent arrested for allegedly exploiting the elderly. Oh, this is what insurance agents do. This one happens to be a fall guy. Excuse me. An investigation by the Oklahoma Insurance Department's anti-fraud unit has led to the arrest of Tulsa insurance agent Presley Keith Dennis. He is accused of defrauding a Muskogee couple out of nearly $300,000. The story goes on to maintain the victims. An 80-year-old man and his 68-year-old wife told investigators that Dennis convinced them to withdraw $300,000 from their annuities and invest it with his company, Dennis Investments. And of course in here it says it's an unlicensed investment firm. They also said Dennis persuaded them to create a joint checking account with him so he could access the money to make investments. Instead of investing the money, Dennis allegedly spent it on past due child support, country club memberships, and restaurants. This is also who you're patronizing, the insurance companies, and you feel protected by them as they prey on you. But this is their function. This is what they do. They take the most traumatic times in your life, twist them around, and make you feel like they're the parent, right? I mean, we're scared of death, right? That is the way that they own you. There's another function of attorneys in this, and I've watched this for years, where an attorney will talk you into getting a will, making up a will, and putting that somewhere on record, and it's certified by an attorney. But this will allows your estate to be probated after your death because you've given the court's invitation to probate your estate. Before a will is drawn up, your oldest born son or your surviving children inherit your estate. There's no question. But now we have to worry about the psychopathic children. We have to worry about stepchildren, as we're seeing in the Joseph Reynolds case. Joseph Reynolds was an elderly man who drew up a will, and one of the stepkids decided, well, I'm going to go after the whole thing. And got himself an attorney. And in just a couple years, Joseph Reynolds was murdered by the medical industry through the attorneys, through these county administrators manipulating him and his family in order for the attorneys to get at the estate. Now, the stepson, John here, he's still at it. He's still going at it. He's trying to gain entry into the home, and he's trying to claim everything as a little psychopath does. And he's got his attorney with restraining order after restraining order against Joseph Reynolds' children, against the estate, and all of his money is being spent paying for these attorneys, and in the end, he won't have access to the estate. He's not an heir, but he doesn't know that. He has no idea. He's just acting at the behest of these attorneys, and it's quite profound to see his redistribution and what he gets for participating. Of course, Caesar always gets what is Caesar's, which is nothing. In the SanRamonExpress.com, January 16th, trial date set for San Ramon attorney charged in hit-and-run death. Nearly 2 years after being arrested for running down a bicyclist in Dublin, felony charges are moving forward for a San Ramon attorney. Spencer Freeman Smith, that's an ironic name, briefly appeared in Hayward Superior Court on Thursday morning with a new hearing and a trial set for the coming months. Smith is charged with hit-and-run and vehicular manslaughter in the May 17, 2012 death of Bo Hugh. Police tracked Smith by tracing wreckage left at the scene to a Mercedes dealership, which led to Smith's 2012 Mercedes-Benz CLS 550, according to court documents. A disposition hearing, which could lead to a resolution of the case against the San Francisco-based employment lawyer, is set for February 20th. This is ironic. Smith's attorney pointed out that his client is also a lawyer and asked that Smith be allowed not to attend that hearing. Now, of course, this is all a show. The minute the attorney appeared and certified the judgment against Mr. Smith, it was all over. But we have a really good show to show the people. We have a really good show to show Mr. Smith. He thinks he's getting a fair trial. Such is the luck of the surety. On the seacoastonline.com, county attorney fights arrested cop's request to return home. Ex-local officer faces domestic assault charge. In Portsmouth, retired police detective Stephen Arnold should not have bail conditions lifted in the wake of his arrest for domestic violence-related assault because the alleged victim's safety could be jeopardized and the criminal case could be compromised, according to the county attorney's office. These are the same cops that are supposed to be protecting you. This detective is what you're patronizing as he beats his wife's head in and does whatever he does as a nice little surety psychopath. Now, we're seeing a lot of attorneys arrested, and this is putting a pinch on people who patronize attorneys. In the WKRN.com, Nashville, attorney for ex-Vanderbilt player arrested for harassment. An attorney representing Vanderbilt University rape suspect Brandon Vandenberg was arrested Tuesday in Clarksville on harassment charges. These are quite amazing to read, of course, because now what do these sheeple do that need their attorney? They think they need their attorney, first of all. Second of all, I fear that this might be a posturing effect, and this attorney will stay on with this Vanderbilt and get off on a technicality because this attorney's charged with all sorts of stuff. You know, so these game plays You know, these presentations, these shows, for the benefit of the sheeple listening, you know, they're all over the place. This is the action of psychiatry. It's all a show. It's all a presentation. It all goes all the way back to the Gelnhausen Charter. You know, we can tell you anything we want because you're not going to remember anyway. We can tell you a bunch of dead guys said for us to tell you to do this, and you'll do it because they're dead, and you want to respect the dead, right? I mean, all of these presentations are everywhere. They're there for your benefit. It sets you up to participate in this game, or partake is a better word for participate. It means eat it up. You're just eating it up as a consumptive society. Consuming, of course, means eating or taking in. And these things are what has you in perpetual servitude. You're consenting by buying into these concepts. Each one of them presented to you, and they get more egregious and more egregious as time goes on, and they want to know what you're going to tolerate, what you're going to accept. What is your tipping point? What is your boiling point? What's going to set you off and make you stand? What's going to upset you the most until you realize that you're living what you're living in, what you're living as? You know, we've got children being abused and tortured. We've got kids being killed for graffiti on a closed-down McDonald's this summer. What are you going to tolerate before you stand? We've got, excuse me, we've got children at schools being found dead in gym mats, and investigations by FBI that say that's natural. We've got males being found tied up and beheaded in garages that are deemed suicides. What are you going to tolerate until you stand? What is your boiling point on this? The FBI called out for the murder of Dr. Martin Luther King. What are you going to tolerate? How much of this are you going to take before it burns your little behind and gets you moving? Every day you're seeing these things. Dozens sickened in a cruise line ship this last week. But you'll go out there and you'll cruise on one of those cruise lines, knowing that, what are the rates on that? With the amount of people that have been sickened, it's almost at 30%. You have a 30% chance of contracting some norovirus, some norovirus, some foodborne illness, anything you can imagine. But you're still going on these cruise lines, and you're still, you know, waiting to have some of that family time. And, you know, quality time with your children, or whatever you're thinking. I watched American Dad this week, the last one, and it was very interesting to see their presentation on, quote, family land. And I do urge, you know, our listeners to not watch Family or American Dad, you know, too much, because of course the levels of indoctrination. But this family land one was quite profound. You know, here's somebody seeking to have quality time together, so they go off to one of these Six Flags or Disney World and find out it's not so nice. And on top of this, the dynamic is, quote, America family land, where you have a landlord that is manipulating, and at the end of the presentation. It was quite profound because this symbol, this owner of this park, who was very much like Disney, by the way, said that as the landlord, he did all of those things against families to teach them a lesson, to teach them to be better. And if you look at the story of Job, that was the same thing. If you look at the story of Jesus, that was the same thing. You know, here they have a set of tests, and that is the foundation of bankrupt states. The original foundation, of course, in the ecclesiastical was a question: are you going to buy the stuff that snake is selling you in the garden, or are you going to turn your back on the snake in the garden? Now, throughout years and time, the passage of time, or concept of the passage of time, these attorneys got greedier and greedier, and the psychiatrists got greedier and greedier. And eventually there was no free will left. They've got fourth generation warfare employed against human beings at all time. Here you have political and economic force applied against you. You've got psychological force against you through the manipulation of the media. All of these things, they don't necessarily allow free will to be occurring. And in this, you know, years and years ago when I first started this, I was like, oh my gosh, when I first realized what was going on, I was so appalled, and I had so much hope. You know, I'm like, oh, when the sheep will find out what's going on, they're just going to go nuts. They're just going to raise up, and we'll see them with pitchforks and torches all over Washington, D.C. and state capitals everywhere and at every courthouse. No. Their bag of silver became food stamps and cash assistance and school loans. Their bag of silver became titles and all of these other gimmicks. And if you want to look at what those gimmicks are, you can read Sticks and Carrots in Procurement. How to get you to buy this stuff, sticks and carrots. Now, the media can offer you a stick or a piece of garbage, and you're going to turn your back on that. But the media has a tendency of offering you a stick and forcing you to turn your back on your fellow man. And the carrots they offer are in line with the Office of Population Affairs of the Department of Health and Human Services, and it's dressed up and it's got all of these bows on it and all of these shiny stickers and pretty things, and it's sold to you in such a way that it looks so beautiful. But the Department of Health and Human Services, stemming from that Office of Population Affairs, was created by Dr. Henry Kissinger in 1975. It was created after his Memorandum 200 to the National Security Council in 1974 that says depopulation should be the highest priority of all foreign policy. Foreign states are counties and states of the United States Incorporated. And foreign policy means the communication between the two, the way they do business, according to the Commerce Clause. Now, the Commerce Clause says that the United States Congress regulates business between states, interstate commerce. And what that means is that they are already granting business licenses to each county, each state, by which it facilitates business. It's the business license is the Commerce Clause of the Constitution. Now, what this also means is that since having been found guilty of genocide and human trafficking, this lays squarely on Congress. If they're not allowing this to occur and the bankruptcy is not facilitated, well, what happens? There's 243 members of Congress that are held accountable for that, right? So all of those monies do become payable in full by Congress, the United States Congress, for the actions of their franchises. Now you can see this anywhere you look. And as they're attacking and capturing enemy vessels on the street through the action of privateering, or they're capturing by deposit in a hospital or bank setting, which is a court. All of these things are outside of bankrupt status. The United States Incorporated sure as heck can't be foreclosing on any property if they're in bankrupt status. Those amounts are to go to the bankruptcy trustee. That's something quite profound. If you ever get a chance to read and research our documents, you can find those chooseyourside.org and tammypepperman.org. You can also visit us on our Facebook pages. I've got a Facebook account. Rocco has a Facebook account. Bono's Entertainment over on YouTube. TammyK32 is my YouTube account. You can also add us on Skype. We have running classes constantly. A lot of them are back channels. So anybody asking to join a class, usually, we've got, first of all, they're full and everything else. But on the back end of that, I do a lot of just one-on-one now because everybody's come forward to the extent that, I'm not running the basic classes at this time because there's not a necessity for that. And so anybody that feels left out, you're not left out. This is what we've been doing, is just this back channel communication, and not ignoring anybody. Of course, there's a lot of hype and gimmick all over Facebook. Let's vote on this. Let's petition for this. Stop petitioning. The doctrine of election says that you'll get a right or a benefit. You don't get both. And you're never the heir. You want to stay away from the electoral aspect of things. There were so many things that I wanted to cover, and right now my internet is slowing down and I'm not there, so pardon the drag here. Going back to that book 2 of the intelligence activities and the rights of Americans, it's so profound to know what actually happened to Dr. King. Now, I'll be honest, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. is one of my heroes. He's always been one of my heroes. Because he stood for humanity, because he also withstood the FBI. He withstood all of the scrutiny, all of the attempts against him. It was years ago when, they started presenting the presentations to get at his estate. I noticed, when Coretta Scott King had passed away and the Hillsborough Baptist Church came in and they were going to pick her funeral and all of these things, you bet we were there raising heck. That's, for me, at that time, it was like, you're not going to disturb her rest in any way. You're not going to try to present to the sheeple that they were something else. And you know, there's a lot of fallout from all of the things that occurred after he was assassinated by the FBI. And it was the same thing with JFK. It was the same thing. You know, here you can read in Book 4 of the Church Committee Reports, the Foreign and Military Intelligence, how JFK was assassinated by the FBI, by the federal state. You know, these things are already written. Everybody's looking for all of these conspiracy theories and listening to conspiracy theorists and listening to a whole bunch of smoke being blown. Or you can read it all yourself. You know, everything's written from the Homeric hymns to the history of Greece, interpreted by attorney George Grote. You know, and he starts out just like every other dream sequence. He'll present, you know, of course, Grote presents that these were all myths, yada, 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 and then he goes through and he starts turning it into reality, and this is the history of Greece, and this is the law, and this is what happened, and this is what attorneys do, and this is what courts do. And all of these things have been presented to not only Americans, not only somebody subscribing to the concept of America or westernized thought, but all across the globe. Yeah, education is being promoted all across the globe, and that was, you know, we have the directives of Wilson way back when, you know, President Wilson, and you know, he was saying, well, we don't need that many of those. We don't need that many of those. Pretty soon everything is going to be automated. You know, and you go back to Wilson's speeches and you can find out just how evil he was. We've got so many things that have occurred that have been allowed by patriotism and consent. You know, follow through with Roosevelt. You know, you've got the raw deal that was offered to everybody. You know, the signing of the Atlantic Charter and the Master Lend-Lease Agreement between Roosevelt and Churchill, the Prime Minister of what was once England. Now it's known as the United Kingdom. But what the heck is a United Kingdom? Okay, everybody's got this in their mind that there's some kind of monarchy over in England. There's no such thing as a United Kingdom. That's like saying that a sovereign citizen exists. You know, all of these things are presentations for you to presume things and assume things. But they're all written and they're right in your face. It's up to you to use your own discernment. United Kingdom. Use your own discernment. Everybody who likes to come on my Skype or on the YouTube presentations and tell me that England has control. England's no longer England, and it's not a kingdom. The Netherlands is not a kingdom. Scotland, Ireland, those things are not kingdoms. The Confederacy turned them into United Kingdom. Just like the United Nations, which is all the counties. Each county in the United States Incorporated is a foreign nation as defined by 28 U.S.C. Chapter 97, the Foreign Sovereign Immunities Act. Each one is a corporation, a franchise of the United States Incorporated, and these franchises were enabled through Enablement Act. Most citizens know those as state constitutions. Those were Enablement Acts, just as much as the 1933 Enablement Act that Hitler provided. And what this says is that the federal state is going to allow the national state to operate as franchises. Period. To alleviate the stress and strain on the people. People means Congress. People means corporations. People means Google and Microsoft, AT&T, BP. All of these things are your government. That's your corporate government. And what happened was in 1933, Congress declared bankruptcy of a, quote, country that never existed. The United States of America is a style or chain of events. You can read this in the Articles of Confederation of 1777, 1781. And what happened was, preemptively, through the 1929 Geneva Convention, a posture, they said that if a citizen doesn't have a government to patronize, or it's lost, its government is gone, that it will be held as a prisoner of war by corporations until it finds its own government, or it expatriates, it goes elsewhere. So then in 1933, Congress came in laughing and said, okay, we're bankrupt. So everybody, every human being on this planet, since the 1941 Atlantic Charter and the Master Lend-Lease Agreement, was made a prisoner of war. Now, all of the agents and officers that may or may not have been directed to listen to our shows, Article 21 of the 1929 Geneva Convention maintains that officers are prisoners of war. These officers find themselves attacked also by the IRS, CPS, adult protection, insurance schematics, car accidents, houses burned down. Stuff just happens. And it looks like coincidence, but that's part of performing as a corporate stock option or prisoner of war under a corporation. A prisoner of war under a corporation can only be a stock option. It backs stock. So it makes the stock perform better. And it upholds the stock market. And when you go to the etymology on such as gender, that says if you're claiming to be a female or a male, citizen, individual, or any other concept, you are a stock, new species, product. And the most profound was that Jesus at one time said, divest yourself of all that possesses you. Don't hold those names. Don't maintain those titles. Don't accept those concepts. And of course in Genesis, it said don't participate. Don't eat of that tree of knowledge. The tree of knowledge, of course, is a fig tree. Fide, in Latin, which happens to be fiduciary, or the character of a trust. Fiduciary is the character of a trust relationship. That means that it's a play act. It's a character in a play. I'm going to play your trustee, and I'll put on a robe, and I'll stand before you, and I'll have this big desk in front of me, which is really an exchequer board if you read the dialogue of the exchequer. And I'm going to determine that you're bankrupt and depraved, because look, somebody's got to discharge this debt. So you run off and you go into court, and this character playing a fiduciary, and this is defined in Black's Law Dictionary, this character playing the fiduciary is going to put on a really big show, and all the attorneys and other bankers are going to play the game too. And when you're consenting, when you're allowing this to occur, when you're putting yourself into that bank as a deposit, as a special deposit, their only rule is to let you walk out of there in the same condition you were before you came in as a special deposit. That means that they can't cut your arms and legs off and make you more aerodynamic. However, they can negotiate you and turn you into a negotiable instrument on the other side, because it's not altering the actual deposit. It's not cutting your arms and legs off or removing anything off of you to make you more efficient other than your assets, as you pay these legal fees for somebody else to represent you and to play the game with the character of the trust there. We've been talking a lot about so many different shoes and everything else, and hopefully after the break coming up, we'll go into more detail. I might have a special guest on. I'm just not sure yet. Now, the book 2 of the intelligence activities and the rights of Americans, it's quite easy to read, this one. And for those who don't like to read the first part, you've got the title, preface, contents, introduction and summary is together. Intelligence activity, a new form of governmental power. The question, summary of the main problems, the number of people affected by domestic intelligence activity, too much information is collected for too long, covert action and the use of illegal or improper means, ignoring the law, deficiencies in accountability and control, the adverse effect of improper intelligence activity, cost and value. Part 2 is the growth of domestic intelligence, 1936 through 1976, summary. The lesson, history repeats itself. The pattern broadening throughout time. 3 periods of growth for domestic intelligence. Establishing a permanent domestic intelligence structure, 1936 through 1945. Now that was interesting. If you go to the 1947 National Security Act, you will find out all of these things are establishing that posture effect. How do we get a predetermined outcome? That's how. And so I urge everybody to read these things, because you can watch the history. You can watch what happened, how they established these things, because slowly, as they impart these concepts to you and you accept them, they can impart more and more and more and more and more. And so they're stacking concepts on top of each other. And what that is it increases your imagination. If you go back to the book known as Leviathan by Hobbes, he explains in detail, how words and concepts are stacked to be appearing as the senses and appearing as imagination. And once you stack these things and people, or the human mind, accepts them, they can teach you more and more and more and more. And finally, we're at the part we're at now, where everybody's running into court. Everybody's fighting each other in court. Everybody's fighting each other outside of court, distrusting each other, mistrusting each other, and rushing in to that character of a trust. Now back to that family situation we were talking about earlier, the stepson and everything else. All he knows is, I want it now, and the attorney presence. That's all he knows. That's his function. And sadly, he's the one that loses. And then, of course, his family, the fallout from all of these things, his family suffers. Because what he's doing is, he wants it now, and he's paying his attorney. He's racking up all of this debt. His attorney has presented in his mind that he's going to get some kind of inheritance. He's a stepson. That house was there prior to his mother's marriage to the father. It's not even marital property. But he has this illusion in his mind that that's going to make his life all okay. And the end result of that, of course, is that his family goes hungry. He's going to be left destitute. And eventually he'll be sleeping in his car. And that's the funny part about these immediate thought processes. Me right now. When push comes to shove, his wife is engineered in this society. That's too much suffering for her, so he's going to be left. And the sad part is that because she's PC, politically correct, the likelihood of the false allegations against him is extremely high, because when she decides she's going to cut loose, she has to have a reason to cut loose. It can't be her fault. And so all of his fallout greatly affects this guy. And all it ever did was benefited attorneys. Every one of his assets, gone. Liquid, tangible, every one of them gone. Because he's got this thing in his mind that, after his mom dies, he's inheriting a whole bunch of stuff. And that's one of the horrifying aspects. He's not taking care of his mother. She's been deemed to be mentally incompetent. She's with him at this time. The last thing I heard was that she passed out in church one time because she was so dehydrated. They're not taking care of her. He's just waiting for her to die so that he can inherit. And that's the saddest part of these PC females raising these children. That's where they get. In the end stage, this female, she's in her 80s now, and she has nothing left. Her child that she raised to be so psychopathic is the one left to take care of her now. And that's sick. That's sick. That's what happened in Bolshevik Russia, Nazi Germany. These poor females that think they got it all made, they're just done in the end stages. She's lost. She's alone. She's, abused, egregiously abused. Determined to be all these titles and everything else. And she's at the weakest point in her life and has a psychopath taking care of her. That's sick. That is absolutely disgusting. So we have to really prioritize here. And one of those priorities is looking towards the future, not living today, me, what can I get today, but contemplating what happens tomorrow, what happens when I'm 80 years old, and if I raise a little psychopath now, what kind of position am I going to be in when I'm 80? I wouldn't want that thing touching me. I wouldn't want it around me. It's so egregious. On the globalnews.ca today, this is global news in Canada, Alberta mother speaks out after daughter dies in governmental care. An Alberta woman is mourning the loss of her 8-year-old daughter who died on Sunday, just over a year after being put into governmental care. The mother, who can't be identified, said her daughter passed away in her sleep at a group home. There was nothing wrong with her heart. Why it just stopped is an answer we want to know, the girl's mother said. Her daughter, this is from the report, her daughter was medically fragile. She had a mild eating disorder and was said to be at high risk of depression if taken away from strong relationships. So a year ago, they did that to her. A year ago, the government, knowing that a child was fragile and that she was high risk of depression if taken away from strong relationships, was taken away from her mother to facilitate her death. Social workers reportedly considered the mother's housing situation to be unstable and unhealthy for the daughter, something the mother adamantly disputes. They believe I was unstable because I was living with family and I didn't have a lease of my own. Well, of course. If you're living with family, you can't be divided and conquered. If you're living with family, how the heck is the government going to get in between you and your child? If you're living with family and you're not single, a single mother to be preyed on by the state, having your own Section 8 housing or welfare benefits, how can they get at your kids? If you had parents that loved you and sisters and brothers that stood by you while the government comes in and lies about you, how would they get in between you and your children? How would they take your children off of you and kill them? How's this one? Here's another child murdered. How much is it going to take before you stand up? Now the story goes on. Not everybody has the ability or the money to live on their own. She didn't have to live on her own. Now my beef is with probably family members that came in and said, well, she can't live on her own. We have to take care of her, and this burden falls on us, and we don't want the burden, so I'm going to hotline CPS here. Stop doing that. Those are little informants. Quote, I don't believe for a second that I deserve to have her taken away from me, and sometimes I wonder, she said, with her voice breaking, if she were here with me, she might still be here, and that breaks my heart. It's horrifying, because if that child was left with her family, with her mother, she wouldn't be dead. If the government had not have taken this child away from her mother and her family that she knew at 8 years old, 7 last year, she would not be dead. Another dead baby brought to you by the Confederacy in action that profits off of these deaths, off of these diagnoses, off of these psychiatrists, off of the medical industry, off of the criminal industry. The story goes on, after her little girl was removed from her care, she was shuffled between group homes and disability service coordinators, according to her mother. Quote, and with all the yanking away that they had caused her, it ended up in severe depression, and that's what started the whole medication thing. Here comes the psychiatrist. Here comes the medical industry. Her mother says that she began to show signs of aggression and depression and was put on several strong medications. Heck yeah, 8 years old, she died in her sleep. By the time of her last visit on Saturday, during which they went swimming, something that was once one of her daughter's favorite activities, the young girl seemed to be a shell of her former self. For one, her mom says her weight had whittled down to 37 pounds, exposing bones across her body. She was drooling a lot, very zombie-like, very shivery, tremoring. So it does make me wonder what were these medications doing to that little body, and why didn't anybody notice? They noticed. This was their intent, to murder an 8-year-old child. Why all these children? Why my daughter? Why other people's children? And why the need for secrecy? Why the need to hide it? Her questions come one day after the province released data on the deaths of 592 children who had received government aid since 1999, but were not wards of the province when they died. That admission follows the results of an investigation into foster care deaths in Alberta that was published by the Edmonton Journal and the Calgary Herald in late November. It found 145 children had died in government care between 1999 and the fall of 2013. Only 56 of the deaths had been made public. The government revealed Wednesday that another 4 children died in care during the latter half of 2013. In regards to the latest death, Minister of Human Services, this is the Department of Health and Human Services, or the Office of Population Affairs, We'll be back after the break, folks. Stick around. And welcome back to the second hour of Leaving the Farm right here on Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, where information never sleeps. We are a listener-supported radio station. If you'd like to donate, please go to www.freedomslips.com and click on our listener support pages. Every little bit helps. I know we're still under par for this month, so anything that you can donate at this point would really benefit the station and keep us on the air. Of course, the hosts are not paid. Hawk is not paid. He already paid out. I know he's got the T3 lineup. We're now on iHeartRadio and Live 365 Studio A, and that is something so amazing for your listener experience. As it's going to just be better and better. And I wanted to finish out the Alberta Mother Speaks Out because it just burns me that so many people are still consenting. In regards to the latest death, Minister of Human Services, which is, of course, the Office of Population Affairs, Manmeet Bhullar says for privacy reasons he could only confirm a death in care had occurred. It is number 150. But he stresses that he's committed to changing laws so that more information can be released on the deaths of children in foster care. I don't want a law that allows me to see how many children are dying in foster care. I want to adhere to the public law that says the government will not be killing my children. Okay, I don't want a new program designed to find out why they died in care. I already know why they died. They're being used to discharge congressional bankruptcy. They're being medicated to the point that they die in their sleep. 8-year-old babies go to sleep medicated to the hilt and do not wake up. I want these individuals, entities, and these government officials held accountable for the deaths of children. I don't want an attorney involved in facilitating legal process against murders of children. I don't want psychiatry involved and all of these funny words and nice pretty things and smoke blown. I want accountability for those that are murdering children. I want accountability for those that are preying on females. And this is happening now. It will catch up to every one of these actors, every one of these psychopaths. I'm going to get off my rant now. I do have a special guest, Bo, with me. Bo, are you there?
Hello, Tammy.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. So what's going on with you this week? Have you seen anything else you want to talk about?
Wow. Well, I was just enjoying some downtime. I did 3 shows this week, which is quite a marathon for me. So this makes 4, I guess. So, no, I guess the news is a little slow and sluggish, it seems, today. But, you know, we've got some of the same old coming in there. One in Oklahoma where a deaf guy was beaten. He's clearly got the marking on his window to indicate he's deaf. It's on his driver's license. And they still beat him for not listening to the orders dished out by this corporate policy enforcer.
Right. He was holding a license then.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that was one of his benefits of being a citizen. He was operating under that business license, which maintains that he's okay to operate as the first, middle, and last name by license to act as a legal franchise. And that legal franchise got beat up. How bad was it?
He's hit several times. Pearl Pearson, 64, was stopped by Oklahoma Highway Patrol after he allegedly left the scene of a minor accident on January 3rd. Pearl pulled over and rolled down his window, expecting an officer to ask for his identification. An officer struck him in the face before Pearl had a chance to do anything. And as you can see, there's a picture and a video there. He was struck several times.
Oh, so corporate counsel had already called it out. The minute that license plate was ran, corporate counsel said that whatever they needed to say to get the officer to beat him. And most of the time, these attorneys were telling these officers that somebody's armed and dangerous, or they're wanted in some way, or whatever they need to do to fester in the mind of the officer that the citizen is bad. So corporate counsel already called that one out because he didn't even talk to him or anything.
Yeah. An affidavit claims that he refused to comply with repeated orders from police to display his hands and that he resisted arrest.
Arrest for what?
Well, I mean...
There's nothing there, is there?
Claiming to be a citizen, so this is the benefit, I guess.
Right. And everybody, you know, you need to read these stories, all of our listeners and things, because resisting arrest is a claim that the psychiatrists use against the citizenry.
His face was hitting my hand.
Yes. Yes, his face was hitting his hand, and other gimmicks that get the sheep all riled up. Now, this poor disabled man, what condition is he in now? Is he in the hospital or is he out? Is he okay?
Looks like it.
Thank goodness.
Yeah, this is over at the dailysheeple.com, if you want to read it.
It's just so sad what's happening by consent. I mean, come on, everybody needs to realize what they're worshiping, what they're buying into, what they're being licensed for. If you have to get a license to be, you're operating as a corporation. You have a business license to be that corporation, a franchise of the United States Incorporated, held in the holding corporations. And they're charging your estates to take care of you. And these charges upon the estates stem from the action, of course, of bottomry bonds. So here's a man that was beaten up, and then his estate was charged for the benefit of being beaten up, and the diagnoses that came with that identical to the action of bottomry bond. So that bottomry bond is paying out on these accounts to the attorneys, to the psychiatrists, to the fund managers, to the doctors that hold these accounts. And what did he get? He got beaten. Maybe he'll go for damages later. I'm sure that an attorney is waiting in the wings at this time to prey on him again and again and again, just like attorneys do. That's what the game is.
Yeah, you got no money. They work pro bono. They get in there any way they can.
Absolutely. They'll offer their services any way possible to garner more funding to discharge congressional bankruptcy and line their own pockets.
Yeah, it's really a question that goes back to the first hour you're talking about. How much of it are they going to take?
Yeah, how much do you take before you stand up? And I've seen sheeple take a heck of a lot. They're accepting all of these things. Oh, renting children, everything you can imagine. You know, your child's raped in foster care or by these governmental agencies, and all of a sudden you've got to check. Well, that's prostitution. You're renting your child's body to them, and you don't even realize these things. Now we've got a lot of politics being played, and politicians being the nice guys, and attorneys being the nice guys, and agents being the nice guys. All of these things are presentations to garner your consent. And we've got to step out of that. You know, we've got the psychiatrist that called into your show, and I'll stop here. Of course, we are simulcasting on TheseChangingTimes.ning.com as well as on No Borders. Scottish Sovereigns on the land.ning.com. And part of that was, you had mentioned that you did 3 shows this week. Those were 2 of them were on RBN with Clint Richardson and the Corporation Nation. And I love listening to those shows, and we do have them playing on these changing times and No Borders for the time being. If anybody wants to catch those over the weekend through Sunday. And again, I mean, we've been dealing with a lot of stuff here, but those were very, very beautiful shows you did this week. I really enjoyed listening to them, especially yours on Wednesday night.
Well, thanks. It was kind of nice to actually get with Clint, because I appreciate a lot of his work he's done with Corporation Nation and exposing what, a hideous construct they've devised through core. And he's really close on tying a lot of these aspects into what we're talking about. But yeah, I had fun on those 2 nights, and of course had a great show Wednesday, despite the psychiatrist coming after me.
That was funny. I have a fantasy.
It's always about a hot dog stand, too.
Yeah, that was a means of engaging the, quote, American mind. If you look at the description of Americans, they like hot dogs, peanuts, Cracker Jacks, and beer and baseball. And that's in the minds of the psychiatrist. So that psychiatrist came on and gave the American mind everything they wanted to hear, and as well as his story that culminated in his, quote, experience in court, when in reality it was all a fantasy. He came in speaking about a dream schematic or dream sequence, and I thought it was, it was just amazing to me that he was trying to garner your listeners, pervert the word, pervert the mind, twist the mind, and that he was so blatant about it.
Yeah, and we had plenty of attacks on YouTube and comments. They're everywhere. It's like I'm beginning to think the only people that are really listening and pay attention are the ones that don't comment.
Absolutely, because they don't have a need to. They're not arguing your word, they speak your word. And that's the most profound aspect of the New Testament and, of course, Revelation. It all comes down to choosing your side. It all comes down to choosing your side. Those who speak your word, speak your word. They already walk it, they already talk it, and they're on this path. They're the same as you. They're not going to argue. They're not going to, come up against you in any way, because that's what your adversary does. And that's the whole metaphor or knowledge of the self of the Bible. If it's read literally, I forgot who that quote was from years and years ago. I read about it, and the quote is, for those that read the Bible literally, they are a fool. And it's written in the 3 variants, meta, soma, veda, and it needs to be read in the 3 variants. And that's the beauty of that work. Even the Old Testament, it says exactly what they're doing, exactly what their manifest is, how they're doing it, the psychological aspect, the action of psychiatry, the use of meta, soma, veda. And, basically it is a rule book, but not as people think, not as to so much a religious construct. It's a real rule book of the exchequer. When you read the dialogue of the exchequer, you find, oh wow, okay, that's what that means. And everybody needs to be aware of who's who, and of course choosing your side. And you can find so much information at chooseyourside.org and tammypepperman.org. And again, I have a Facebook, Rocco has a Facebook, Bono's Entertainment over on YouTube, and Tammy K32 on YouTube. And again, we're rebroadcasting constantly on these changing times, and I'm so thankful for Patty to allow us that venue. And of course, I'm thankful to Ben at No Borders for allowing us that venue as well. So we're broadcasting in the UK and in Scotland, constantly now, and it's beautiful that we're reaching so many. And again, I love the humanity, and on the flip side, I also enjoy watching the law merchants, the psychiatrists and the judges, attorneys, you know, all of these agents come up against us now. They're whining and crying, and that's what's written in Revelation 18. They will be wailing because they've lost so much. Nobody's purchasing these laws. Nobody's purchasing these concepts, except for very few. And sadly, you know, that deaf man that was attacked by privateers this week, my heart goes out to him. But again, it all comes down to consent. What are you consenting to? What are you calling your father?
Right, and it's really confusing and hard to swallow for especially those that have been so indoctrinated by following quote-unquote legal gurus or priests and psychologists, whether knowingly or unknowingly. And, you know, we had David Williams, the right of self-determination guy, who has a paid website, by the way. You know, and a good way to spot a psychiatrist is when they say, you said, and then they quote you, and then they immediately twist it around.
Absolutely.
And he does that continually.
And that was the psychiatrist that I was watching this week too, right? The one that I was reading the comments and everything on. Is that the one that you're referring to?
Yes.
Oh yeah, he's a shill there. And on top of that, I had a fun time with him because when I called him out as a psychiatrist, of course he did not deny that. He came back at me and said he had immunity for his works and actions. And I said, no, I can guarantee you by your own laws that you're subscribing to, 28 U.S.C. Chapter 97, you have absolutely no immunity and no sovereignty because you are a person subscribing under acts of commerce and private acts. And at that point in time, he backed away from me and started attacking you, which was very, very interesting because he was trying to twist your word and everything else and make you feel uncomfortable. And, of course, he was trying to invoke the use of title, which was funny because, as everybody knows that listens to us, you don't claim any titles. You just are, and you've been walking as a state of being, as a sovereign state now for a very long time, and evidencing your works just as much as these psychiatrists are evidencing their works. And that's what the rule book says will happen. Everybody is known for their works and actions. So here you have the mark of God, and they're the ones with the mark of the beast. And that mark is already there. And in your court case, that's was the final order. Everyone is to be held accountable for their works and actions. So if there's a director directing the death of somebody, that director gets the accountability rather than just the law enforcement officer who is acting on those directives and assuming that they were protecting somebody and whatever else. And that's something I really would like to touch on a lot here. We love law enforcement. And all of this time, the majority of our shows are to protect law enforcement from being harmed in any way based on the directives of their handlers, attorneys and psychiatrists. And it was profound for me to watch what happened this week in the theater shooting down in Florida, because that officer, the retired officer, he had been in the theater. He had an altercation and an argument with somebody using their cell phone. Now, he walked out of the theater. That's usually a sign that he walked out to go cool off, to go cool down. Well, somebody, and all of the reports are saying this, that he was on the phone with somebody, and then all of a sudden he's back inside the theater, and there's a dead guy laying on a lap of just a patron of the theater, and here's this cop with a gun in his lap and a bewildered look on his face. Now, I've experienced the Manchurian Candidate. The night that I was attempted on, That guy was on the phone, and the next thing I know, he's beating my head in. This is a 64-year-old doctor that was, we read the Bible together. We spoke about chemistry and medicine and everything else. And metabolism, I mean, he was amazing when it came to Krebs cycle and everything else. He was, he had a degree in microbiology, for example. And never, ever any signs that he was violent in any way whatsoever. However, he was on the phone, and the next thing I know, I'm getting my head beat in, and he's apologizing to me for my death, telling me, you were such a good female, you were such a good woman, you were such a good friend. And he's literally crying as he's facilitating my death. And that action alone is a Manchurian candidate. He doesn't want to kill me, so why is he trying to kill me? There's some kind of force there. And we saw that this week again with the officer that walked out of the theater, got on the phone, and ended up killing somebody. And then at the end, he was just sitting there with a bewildered look on his face, gun in his lap, hands in his lap, thinking about what the heck just happened. And I want everybody to know, and I want everybody to realize these things. Really use your discernment at this time, because these are the actors at the behest of psychiatrists, at the behest of attorneys, at the behest of corporate counsel, at the behest of the Board of Commissioners.
Yeah, a lot of times in these videos you'll see where the police violence escalation occurs is the cop will first go back to his car and make a call.
Right, or they have it in their ear. You've seen the earbuds in their ear all the time now. They're being talked to by dispatch, but dispatch, and everybody can listen to this on Bono's Entertainment for what was the one, privateer's attempt on a United States vessel. Now, when we were on the phone during the stop of Chadwick Sterling, when I was talking to dispatch, who did she have in her ear? Finally, in the call, I found out that it was Whistleman. And she had asked me, the moment I said that name of the Board of Commissioners, everything turned around, everything stopped, and she was set up to defend Whistleman, the Board of Commissioners guy. And so you know that she was on the phone with him, and she was the one directing law enforcement at that time. And again, it was last week when we saw the shooting of somebody who was stopped. Within, 30 seconds, I think it was? Corporate counsel had called out the cops. They went out there. 30 seconds later, he's dead. These are on the directives of corporate counsel. These are on the directives of psychiatrists. They didn't have any reason otherwise to fear this individual besides what they've been told immediately preceding these killings. Now, those officers need to be protected by all of humanity, because this is what happened during the Civil War. Human beings and citizens were pit against law enforcement. Law enforcement was pit against citizens. And we can see that expressly with what happened to Dorner. Dorner had turned on his handlers. He was outing them. He was saying, look, that guy's corrupt, that guy's corrupt, that guy's corrupt. And he ended up being burned alive in a cabin. These things have to stop right now, and human beings need to realize what is going on and stop being pit and polarized against your brothers and sisters, and go after the psychiatrists, go after corporate counsel, go after these directors, go after the administration, go after Congress, who's directing policy. The Department of Justice, of course, directs law enforcement policy and agenda. The Department of Justice is under the judiciary, 28 U.S.C. Who created the judiciary? Congress, 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 Congress. Now these things, these deaths, these beatdowns, these horrifying things, murder of the children, these are all maintaining discharging of the congressional bankruptcy. We have to stop these things. How does a child enter into the CPS system? Through the court. Who has control over the court? Congress, the Board of Governors. And, of course, the media, mainstream media, is controlled by the Broadcasting Board of Governors, bbg.gov. Go to their About pages. Find out that the Secretary of State, who happens to be the clearinghouse to discharge congressional bankruptcy, sits on the Board of Governors at the Broadcasting Board of Governors. He's the head. And here you have the Broadcasting Board of Governors has full international control of all civil media. So what they're presenting in all of this indoctrination is used against you, the human being, to discharge congressional bankruptcy. That's what all this television programming is about. Radio broadcasting programming is about. All of these federal funds are there to engineer a product. And that product is the human being. You need to walk away and stop being product. Stop getting that business license to drive. Stop getting those business licenses to operate as franchises of the United States Incorporated, because you're going to be treated as such. Product.
Yep, exactly. Yeah. Then you have these priests out there, too. These priests they're very deadly, too, if you're not able to recognize how they're twisting the reality, creating consensus reality. There's this one Skyper that goes by Almond One Bondservant.
Oh, yeah.
Now, if that name in itself isn't a false flag.
Yeah, man, I've had interactions with him, too. He's such a fool. And the priests are trained in psychiatry. That's what a priest is. When you go back to Matthew 23 through 27, you'll find out what the psychiatrists were doing. Jesus was ticked off at them. He was going after them, the teachers of law and all of these things. Woe unto you. And these priests, they're nothing but psychiatrists, and they're set in the same symbols. So you have a psychiatrist with an office or a hospital setting on one side, and then you have a psychiatrist with a church setting on the other side. And that one looks even better, right? I mean, it looks like they're there for you, and you should patronize them and everything, but they're not adhering to the Word of God. They're adhering to the Word of the Lord God, and that can be seen expressly in 1 Corinthians 6.
Yes.
Yeah, and Jesus had maintained, don't do that. You can only fornicate by giving your body over to the Lord God. The body is not for fornication, but for the Lord, and the Lord for the body. And God hath both raised us up, or the Lord God up, so shall he raise us up by his own power. And you can see this expressly in the Constitution. Power is vested in Congress assembled, the United States Senate and the House of Representatives assembled. Congress, of course, means with transgression. And so you have this whole establishment of the worst thing that could ever happen upon human beings, and human beings are patronizing it and calling it Father. And I'd like to talk more about that Alman, because I've seen some of his posts, and he's not the greatest psychiatrist because he's set off so easy, but he's teaching other people, and that's what Jesus was so mad about in the leaven of the Pharisee, because he's teaching the leaven of the Pharisee, and of course leaven stems from the word loaf, and the word Lord stems from the word loaf. And so if you're teaching the word of the Lord, you're marked on your forehead. You're going to be held accountable for those things, and that's what Jesus said.
Yeah, and I don't know if he doesn't realize this. He's too religiously indoctrinated. I can't really say because I've never had a face-to-face. But from the way he speaks in these rooms, I don't think he would fare too well in a face-to-face with anybody, it seems like, if he spoke that way.
No, but priests are taught that they're immortal. They're untouchable because they have those robes, and they have a big building to sit behind, and they have judges that'll grant them restraining orders if they fall into, any kind of crap. But what we saw this week, what was that story about the Pope this week that you were talking about earlier? The Pope is now gone off and defrocked. I can't remember how many you said, but it was
400.
400 priests. And in that, that's not just a slap on the hand. That allows them up for grabs. And that's going to be the sad, downfall of such as Alman and whatever his name is as a priest or psychiatrist. And that's sad to me that they set themselves up for a fall like this by teaching the weapon of the Pharisee.
Now, Jen in the chat room over here at Freedom Slips asks, do you think it's some form of brainwashing or mind control?
Absolutely. That's what television programming is. The foundation of education stems from the word pedagogy, meaning attendance on boys. This is removal of the firstborn son. And there was no gender back at Jesus. Jesus simply means your earth, G-E space S-U-I-S. And all of these things are intended to move you outside of your state of being, outside of yourself, and teach you a new self that you can look at. And it seems almost impossible for this to occur. But when a human being is walking along, looking inward at itself, it's not in the present tense. It's defending some kind of title, and it's walking around, and it's a thing at that point because it's not as its relative state of being. Now, if you can look outside of your eyes, like Jesus said, and protect the other you, which is the person you're looking at, that's when you're in the relative state of being. That's when your actuality exists. That's when you exist, and you're in the present tense, and that's what Jesus said. Take up your cross and follow me. That means the guy you're looking at.
Now, this Alman 1 bondservant character, his claim to fame is he had 7 judges recused allegedly.
And then what happened?
Well, I don't know. I mean, no one was held accountable because that's the whole point of his method, is to compel the Queen's oath to upholding God's word above all other laws. And, yeah, well, the way I see it, it pretty much amounts to like an ostrich hiding his head in the sand. He's still got his big old ostrich tail out there exposed.
Well, and what he's doing is he's increasing the dollar amount. So as time goes by, and we saw this years and years ago. I felt really good about recusing judges for the longest time because at first, we set out recusing judges too. And you recuse a judge, then they get another one on the case. You can recuse that one, they get another one on the case. This only draws out the case, and the whole time the sheeple are paying these attorneys and the show is still going on, but it just draws out the length of time, and that allows you to be redistributed more efficiently. Because eventually you just get the same judge, they do the same thing they were going to do against you originally, but now you've expended more money in between to pay for your attorney or whatever else is going on. And then, of course, the Queen's oath compelling the Bible. Now, the Reagan had said the Bible is the word of law, or whatever else. That was referring to the Old Testament. That refers to the Lord God. Go ahead and have, that's a lot like, it's exactly like compelling the judicial oath, 28 U.S.C. 453. Come on, take my body, discharge congressional bankruptcy by taking me in it. That's the same thing as a habeas corpus. Take me, I'm yours. These things are all actions presented by psychiatry so that you believe something's going to happen or something positive is going to happen, and that's the action of averment. All it does is extends these cases out further. The length of time grows and grows and grows and grows so that more assets can be redistributed by court process in between.
Yeah, they're trading behind the scenes on QSIPs and all the rest of it and generating all these funds.
Right.
Yeah, okay, I guess you got another one of us recused.
Right. Recusing judges makes attorneys wet their pants in excitement.
Yeah. Yeah, it's sick. I mean, I don't, if he's just so far gone as far as the brainwashing and indoctrination, I feel bad for him. If he's perpetuating this sort of activity on purpose, well, either way he's going to be held accountable. So that's the unfortunate thing for him.
Absolutely. It's already in his works and actions. And I've had interaction with him, and he is maintaining with intent. I mean, we presented for months and months and months and months the actual truth, and here he is. He just goes back to whatever he's doing anyway, and he's teaching the Pharisee the leaven of the Pharisee.
Of the Pharisee, yeah. Yeah, and delivering them up.
Yeah, and then twisting our words, and that's the funniest part. That's what a psychiatrist does.
Yeah, he keeps implying or stating specifically that we are engaging in commercial law, commerce.
Absolutely not. And the saddest thing for these individuals and entities that are claiming this stuff like this, Alman, go back to the 1832 Nullification Proclamation, and you'll see how the action of averment actually works. So Andrew Jackson had come in and said it's unlawful, illegal for you to argue statute and legislation. And if you do that, you're going to be held in contempt. Now, it's not in-your-face contempt, but if you're in the appeals court for 18 years, you are in a state of contempt. If you're in appeals court for 12 years, you're in a state of contempt. And all that time, your assets are just being redistributed. They're eking out every last penny of your estate. And that's what the action of averment provides. Positive statement after positive. We're going to win this time. Go ahead and pay these, filing fees so that we can get you in there on appeal. And then you're stuck in the appeals court forever. That is action of averment. You've got, at the end of it, you've got, 6 feet of documentation. You've killed, I don't know how many trees. The attorneys have killed, I don't know how many trees. And
yeah, with their paperwork.
Absolutely, they're disgusting. And that was a funny thing that happened to me this week too. This man by the name of Josie Wells came on to argue me. First of all, that name, for those that adhere to and really enjoyed the old westerns, Josie Wells was a character played by Clint Eastwood, which was a hero character. He was a hero pastor, and he saved a female from being raped, and he saved a whole town and everything else. So this guy's walking around with a name that indicates that he's some kind of hero. So he came on one of the things that we had done against the psychiatrist this week, and he says, he started complaining, and then all of a sudden he turned everything around like a psychiatrist does, and he says, and you don't even care about the environment. Environmentalism. And so he's telling me, look that other way, look over there, and he's telling my listeners, look over there. Don't look at what is actually occurring. Look somewhere else. Look over there at environmentalism. Look over there at this or that. And that's the practice of what psychiatry is. That's what psychiatry does. And I thought it was very profound for us to be attacked by so many psychiatrists this week, because they're kicking and screaming just exactly as it is written in Revelation 18.
Yes. Yep. I mean, if you read Revelation 18, the merchants are wailing, and we're talking law merchants.
Absolutely, because that's their bread and butter. For a psychiatrist is people buying concepts. That's their bread and butter. If they can't sell the concept, they can't sell the medication that comes with the concept. They can't sell the institutionalization that comes with the concept.
And then they sold that Federal Reserve note, back when?
Absolutely.
1913. And with that concept, everything else that goes with it, all the laws that are attached to that Federal Reserve note, Title 12 bankruptcy, judges' oaths, 28 U.S.C. 453, discharge congressional bankruptcy. Well, I'm a living man here in your court today, Your Honor. Right. Well, thank you very much here. We will certainly enter you in as a special deposit and offset that congressional bankruptcy.
And you can have 0.82% of all of the derivatives if you only claim that title.
That's right.
Man, female, whatever you want to claim. If you claim that concept, I'm going to cash in on that, says the court. You can get 0.82% eventually, but you have to prove that you deserve that. So you have to be damaged. You have to let me beat you up. You got to let us beat you up and arrest you and do things to your body.
Well, these people want to do everything in their power to divert you away from the restrictive principle of sovereign immunity.
Absolutely. Right after you won the cases and everything in August, I think is when they hid that off of their government printing office too. Then the Sovereign Immunities Act itself that was up on the GPO forever.
Yes.
That was hilarious to see, because they were trying to hide it from you and hide it from the average sheeple from accessing that. But we do have copies if you want to add us on Skype. we can get those over to you and everything else. And for those that are out there, when you find information and it's hot button issues or hot topic issues, there's a product online that you can get for free called HT Tracks, and it's a website downloader. So if you think that the information is going to disappear, download it and keep it on your hard drive, and it can't disappear. You always have a copy on your hard drive, and that makes it easier for you, especially those that are just up and coming and they want to teach these things and show what is going on. It's best if you do save those things so that you have the evidence to show them as you're teaching this, because as everybody knows, you know, you're trying to teach your families and everything else, and I get this all the time. My family thinks I'm crazy. Okay, show them the evidence. They cannot contest evidence. And again, the funniest aspect of all of everything that we've gone through with this case and coming up against these psychiatrists and everything else, the evidence of the criminal acts perpetrated by Congress are in their acts themselves. Every one of their congressional acts, from 16 U.S.C. 7, they're in the charters, Charter of Virginia. All of their criminal acts are actually written down and documented. And there's no going outside of that. There's no getting rid of that evidence. It already exists. It's in their actions. And that's the beauty of Jesus coming in and saying, you are known for your works and actions. There's written down. And there's no going outside of that. There's no hiding it. It's already written. And, you know...
And there's nothing you can do as a citizen once they've convinced you that you need to subscribe yourself as such or claim any title that they own through the letters patent.
Right.
You have no access to the restrictive principle of sovereign immunity and holding them accountable because you're coming in under their concept.
Right. And we were talking about the letters patent, the letters of marque and reprisal. Those things are only written statements. So, like for California, for example, a letter of marque and reprisal is the statute that allows an officer of the law or a law enforcement officer to maintain business. It'll say, well, this law enforcement officer is this. This is what our law enforcement officer looks like. That's what the statute said. This is what it does. This is who it protects, going out and collecting goods and products, services, whatever. But those are letters of marque. It's just letters written down to describe what a thing is. And the letters patent, again, that's the same thing. The letters patent are letters written down to describe you. And that comes in the form of Eric's son, John's son, Alsop, Smith, blacksmith, silversmith. Those are letters patent. And when you're grabbing those things, those concepts, taking them and partaking of the tree of knowledge, eating it up, subscribing, you're using that property of the patent owner until now. Now, that's another thing that we'll be dealing with in the months to come, because in this reality now, and we won the case against Congress, the United States actually owns those patents now because the United States Incorporated is bankrupt. They cannot maintain any derivatives or revenue off of anything, especially royalties off of intellectual property. And that's something that will be dealt with in the coming months. And I know that this is hard to wrap the mind around, but it's so simple that the formulation of law literally means to lay down. And that's what Jesus was trying to say. One of these days you'll be able to stand again or be resurrect. That means to stand again. It doesn't say that Jesus is coming back from the dead, which would be reincarnation. It said that Jesus, your earth, will be resurrect. You will stand again because you'll be outside of the action of laying down, which is law. And that's something that we need to hammer home here so that everybody realizes that they are able to stand. It's not hard. Bo, are you here? You're here.
Feels like I am.
Right.
I touch myself.
So your being and everything, and you've gone through all of this. You found him guilty. They are following your directives. I mean, this is just so beautiful in all its evidence. And, you know, I'm so sad that there's still people out there that are so much in fear because they fear the government, because they are pressed down by the government or in a state of depression. And especially the action of cognitive dissonance, which that was interesting to watch this last week with these psychiatrists. They're absolutely disassociated from themselves. No, you can't hold me accountable. I have immunity. I have this piece of paper. That one David Williams was saying, I have treaties. I have pieces of paper that say I can do this or that. No, you really don't. You don't have any immunity and no sovereignty. And he went right into cognitive dissonance. No, this can't be happening. Nope, this can't. La 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 la. I'm not hearing you.
Yeah.
But it was like, holy cow! You know, all of this time, the citizen had been so subjugated by that alone, the cognitive dissonance, falling back on an easier to believe truth, that it was so. It was awe-striking for me to see psychiatrists and agents and other sureties in the action of cognitive dissonance, and watching these attorneys now, hiring attorneys to get them out of their woes and trouble, and you know, those are certifications of cognitive judgments against them in the first place, and watching all of these things occur has just been absolutely awe-striking. I'm just amazed at all of these things, and my mind is overwhelmed and boggled by, you know, watching the shift. I mean, it's absolutely turned all the way upside down, and from what we formerly knew, including the mainstream media taking up the happenings in Canada with that little girl being murdered recently by the government. That the mainstream is actually presenting that was something that didn't occur, because this is happening in real time. Before, the mainstream media would cover something like the stolen generations in Australia in a past tense way and say, well, it was a different child protection service or whatever in the sheep of mine. But in actuality, now they're presenting what is occurring now and reporting on this now, which is something that it didn't happen before. And these things are beautiful in all of these things. You know, the horrifying aspect of a little child, 8 years old, being murdered, it's horrifying. But there is beauty in that the mainstream media is covering that. And I was thankful to see that.
Yeah, that, and along with the church and what happened where the 400 priests were defrocked.
Yeah, their father left them. They've been forsaken by their father, and that's what happens. Now who's on the cross? Now who's crying out, Father, where are you? The Lord God's children are crying out. And that's the most beautiful thing. So there's another individual on that cross now, and it's not the human being.
Yeah, it's a really amazing time. So we gave him a timeline in this. So, you know, we know, and if you look at the paperwork, you'll see it. Well, I call it paperwork, but the case you can access at chooseyourside.org in the documents section. You know, they have 2 years to basically deprogram the people, and so we're going to see this unfold over a couple years. It's not going to happen overnight, but you're seeing arrests of attorneys, judges, cops, agents, you know, anybody that is basically now liable as the new surety at Northern Holding and Trust, which was formerly Northern Holding Corporation. Or, I'm sorry, I got that backwards. It was first Northern Holding and Trust, and then now we know it as Northern Holding Corporation, headquarters in Chicago.
Right, without a parent company. And that's something, because I get questions about that often, you know, what is a corporation company? What is Northern Holdings? You know, who holds that? It's attorneys that hold that. The company corporation, of course, is where the utilities are stored at this time. But that goes all the way back to the original Accessory Key trusts that were transferred over into the public utilities. And, you know, keep watching, folks. Keep listening, because it gets better and better from here on out.
Yeah, we just have to be wary, mindful of these agents out there and psychiatrists that are going to try to turn you away from seeing the restrictive principle of sovereign immunity and how that works, how they can be held accountable, because they don't want to be held accountable, obviously.
Oh, and that was another thing, these whisper campaigns back channel. We got whisper campaigns this week trying to say that I'm a meanie. Okay, now Jesus taught compassionate justice. That means removal of all harm from ability to harm humanity. Now, if you're a psychopath, I'm a terrible, terrible, terrible person in your eyes. And I will maintain and continue to be a terrible, terrible, terrible person in your eyes. Whispering doesn't make it any better for you. It just outs you as my adversary. Just so you know.
Which, when we look at the etymology, adversary and Satan are interchangeable.
Absolutely. That is the definition of Satan. It's an adversary, someone who plots against another. And I thought that was very profound to see all of these whisper campaigns saying that I'm a meanie. Absolutely. I am required and obligated to remove all harm from the ability to harm.
Now, I get the same thing when I come up against, I'm perceived as coming up against folks like Dean Clifford, who's in jail. Somebody posted a link to one of his seminar presentations, which was the seminar presentation where at the end of which they came in and picked him up and hauled him off to jail. It was back in November. He's still in jail. Okay? So, you know that he's got that joinder there to the other daddy somehow in some way, and I heard it in the first 2 minutes of like his third announcement from jail that he said he's a private something or another, a self-determining governmental body.
Right. And the most profound to me to see was that all of these attacks, the majority of these attacks by psychiatrists happen to be in regards to the Dean Clifford thing. So if a psychiatrist is coming in to defend an agent or an entity, that usually indicates and evidences that that thing is an agent.
I'm just trying to point out why he's in jail, and then somebody's posting his links, to go, recommending them to go watch them.
Absolutely.
And I said, warning, side effects may include handcuffs, being thrown in the back of a squad car and hauled off to jail or some such. And my post was deleted by the administrator of that room.
Absolutely. And it's going to be because they're presenting a presentation. It's a show. Dean Clifford, just picture him as an actor. And that's what we found out this week by the evidence of the psychiatrists coming in to defend all of these things and not to defend all of these things.